Chapter 20. The paramedics arrived first. The lights were on, but the siren was turned off once they pulled onto the barn property in deference to the horses. The gates had been left open in anticipation of their arrival, and they pulled up directly in front of the arena. The doors alongside had been pushed open to provide fresh air and access, so the paramedics didn't have to go through the barn to access their patient. While they had been waiting, Laura had made sure Bianca didn't move, a true test of her patience. Bianca was clearly unhappy with having to sit on the ground for any length of time. Imogen inwardly smirked. It made her feel better to see a little fire was still there. Hopefully her injuries were minor. Laura stepped back and gave the medics access as they took her vitals and brought a board over. As they maneuvered her carefully onto it, she thought she heard Bianca snap. "My boots have zippers in the back. Do not cut my boots." Imogen finally did laugh, turning it quickly into a cough when the trainer whipped her head around in censure. She raised her hands up in a shrug and followed them to the ambulance. As she did, another rig pulled through the open gates. The cavalry had arrived. Gabe pulled in with his truck, his trailer behind. Gabe jumped out and walked straight to Bianca, who, when she saw him, started to cry silently. "Gabe, you're here." She held out a hand, which he took. "Bianca, you're in good hands. Let them take care of you." She smiled a little. "You know me so well. Fine, I'll be good for the doctors." She caught her breath, wincing when she spoke, something that didn't escape Gabe's notice. "Don't talk. I'll go after Fortune. I've got the horses with me. Just worry about yourself." "Imogen called you?" She did. Gabe looked down into her face, which was swollen and dirt-marked. "We'll take care of him." "Okay." Bianca replied quietly, and squeezing his hand, let the paramedics take her onto the ambulance. He watched her go, not liking how small she looked. She'd been a big part of his life for a long time, first as childhood friends, and then as someone to spend time with when he returned from overseas, when he needed to heal from his own trauma and experiences. She'd been there for him when he needed a friend, and had always been larger than life. It was hard to see her taken so low. With a deep sigh, he fixed the ball cap on his head and looked over at Imogen. "Come on, you. Let's go get him." Imogen was torn. She had watched their entire interaction with mixed emotions. She knew they had a history, and in those last few moments, it was apparent that they were entirely comfortable with each other. Bianca let herself be unguarded around him, and he obviously cared for her in return. It was beautiful, but for some reason it also made her gut churn. It was something she didn't want to think about too much. So she pasted a smile on her face and followed him to the trailer so they could unload the horse and mount up. They were on a search and recovery mission to find a runaway thoroughbred. They moved at a quick pace, reversing the trail ride they'd done only recently, but with a sense of urgency this time. Occasionally, Gabe would dismount and check something invisible, at least to Imogen, on the ground, only to remount and take off at a canter again. He moved with purpose, and she couldn't help but admire him. He was just so steady under pressure. When she needed help, he was the first person she thought of. There was just something about how he took in a situation and took control. Usually, she was in charge, and admittedly, it made her a bit of a control freak. For once, it was nice to admit she was out of her element and let someone else take over. She followed him, keeping pace without a problem. When he would hold his hand up in a gesture to stop, she immediately responded, and they moved quickly but silently. Luckily, the trail was well used, and it seemed that Fortune was following the path. Thank goodness. She knew his reins were broken and his tack was not on properly, so if he went into the underbrush, there was a good chance he would get caught up and injure himself. Gosh, she really hoped they found him quickly. Running away was becoming a habit she really wanted Fortune to stop. Riding in silence with Gabe was nice, even comfortable really. For once, she didn't feel the need to talk and fill the space. She wasn't sure if it was because they were so focused, or because he was naturally quiet and only spoke when he had something important to say. Regardless, it was kind of nice to listen to the chittering of squirrels as they passed by their branch, or hear the chilly autumn breeze whistle through the remaining gold and pumpkin-colored leaves. Imogen raised her face to the sky, seeking the light filtering through the overhanging limbs and enjoying the warmth on her skin. Despite their mission, she loved being out on the trails. Gabe turned back to check on Imogen, who had gone uncharacteristically silent, and caught her in that quiet moment, the soft light filtering through and her face upturned to the sky like some autumnal goddess. Her auburn hair lit like fire, her fair skin glowing with the fresh air and exertion. She was breathtaking. He swallowed hard. Before he could turn back around, she opened her eyes and grinned widely at him. He swallowed hard, choking on his saliva. He coughed, pounded his chest, and broke the moment. She laughed aloud. "Come on, cowboy, you can't die on me. We have an escape artist to find." She nudged her horse forward, coming up next to Gabe and Rowdy on the big gray lesson horse. He was certainly a lot more awake in the woods than the arena. There was a question that had been nagging her for a while. "Why do you think Fortune bucked and bolted this time?" Gabe thought about it, but didn't have a good answer to give. It's hard to say. 9 times out of 10, it's physical, but I've evaluated that horse several times and haven't been able to diagnose anything that would explain his behavior. He's been flexed, nerve blocked, joint injections, and all the standard tests. He paused, thinking. The bolting could be nerve pain. The sudden shock could surprise him and cause him to run away from it. Imogen tilted her head, considering. What could cause that, though? Is that common? Gabe responded. Inflammation, pressure on the nerve from an imbalance in the soft tissue or the skeleton, nerve damage, kissing spines, arthritis, problems with the hoof angles. Yeesh, it could be anything. Poor guy. Yes, there are a lot of reasons. Sometimes, though, we don't always get the answer. Fortune will be okay. Right now, I'm more worried about Bianca. That was a nasty fall. Yes, I'd like to find Fortune and get him home so we can check on her progress. Imogen kicked into a lope, taking the lead. Gabe shook his head in disbelief. Sometimes people just surprised you. He followed behind, Rowdy content to follow. They traveled another 2 miles when his satellite phone rang out, piercing the sounds of nature. Rowdy halted with a shift of his weight, and Gabe dropped the rein to pull out the phone from his belt. "This is Dr. Davis, go ahead." He listened carefully, nodding before exclaiming, "He's where? You've got to be kidding me." Imogen stared, wide-eyed. It was the first time she had seen Gabe lose his composure and raise his voice. He was usually so unflappable. It was nice to see a chink in his perfect armor. He finished his call and then turned around to go back to the barn. Imogen called out after him, "Wait, where is he?" He was ahead of her, but she heard, "You'll never believe it," as he laughed and rode back to the farm.